This is going to hurt my frugal friends out there. So I was reading an article talking about how psychology, our way of thinking, and money, how they interact. And if you're somebody who follows along with Dave Ramsey's financial tips and things like that, then you may have heard of him saying before that life is not a math problem, and that for most people, they know what good spending habits look like. They know mathematically what the right thing to do is, but behaviorally, they're making choices that are hurting their personal finances. So I was reading a little bit about this article, and it was talking about the fact that we as people have kind of two things going on in our brains. We have one that is kind of our impulsive, automatic thinking that we have. And then the other is our more reflective thinking that allows us to make more advanced and deeper thoughts about specific topics. And so they were talking about how people have what they call heuristics, or rules of thumb, that they guide their thinking by, and that is what allows them to make automatic thoughts very quickly. So we're going to kind of go over some of those rules of thumb that are faulty thinking that causes us to make bad decisions financially. So the first one that they mentioned is called availability bias. So essentially these are situations where you think about specific instances in history, whether it be the history of the country or your own personal history, and then this current problem you're in, you assume it's going to be similar to that problem. And they gave the example of the stock market. So when the stock market crashes, people start pulling their money out and all this stuff because they think about the Great Recession, they think about the Great Depression, they think about those horrible times in the stock market and them losing money, so they pull their money out due to those instances without thinking beyond the current stock market crash, knowing that it's going to rebound and there are going to be opportunities to gain back your money. So you could think about your own personal life and how when you run into certain situations, sometimes you think about personal events that happened in your life, and you attach what happened then to what's going on right now and assume that the current problem is going to end up exactly like those previous problems. People with, I guess you could say, trauma or rough histories can fall into this trap of thinking that the current situation is going to play out exactly the same as the previous ones. And then that causes us to make irrational decisions, which then can put us in a hole and hurt our finances. The next one that they talk about is representativeness bias. And they gave the example of the Great Recession, when lots of banks started going under, and that hurt people's finances, especially with the mortgages and the mortgage crisis that happened during that time. And that seeing all this in the news caused people not only to see bankers in these big national and international companies as greedy and corrupt, but they started associating that with community bankers too. So these small-time banks that may only exist in your small town or may only exist in one state, they started associating the behavior of these big corporation bankers with these small-time bankers and putting them in the same group. And this can be bad when we do that because we may miss opportunities for financial success for ourselves because of that association. So for me personally, I fall into this trap when it comes to the automotive industry. So I think of pretty much anybody in the automotive industry when it comes to dealerships, mechanics, oil change places, tire replacement places. All of them get lumped up into the same thing for me, which is they're shysters. They're constantly trying to upsell you. They're not really in the business for your good or anything like that. So for me, that's something I have to constantly overcome when it comes to working with people like that. That no, not every person out there is trying to swindle you. And that just shows that when you do find somebody like that, especially in the automotive industry, that is honest and handles things with integrity, that you should hang on to that person and you should continue to keep that relationship because they are one of the good ones. So, but that just shows, though, if you always think about things as everybody's bad, you're going to miss those opportunities where there is a good one, and you miss that relationship because you assume that they're bad too, and now you're continuing to find other bad auto dealer people out there that are just trying to pull one over on you. So that's something that I've had to overcome personally, and I have found mechanics that I trust, that I feel they are doing the right thing, they have integrity, and they are the first ones that I will call if I need my car fixed or whatever big repair that needs to be done. So if you find yourself in the same boat as me, that's something that has to be overcome, because as a rule of thumb, if you're always thinking automatically about that person because of their profession, they must be a shyster. Well, that may not always be the case. The next one that they talked about is anchoring bias. And this one's a big one, especially with certain companies. Anchoring bias is when you come in and the first price tag you see, that is the price that holds value to you. So I think of like Hobby Lobby, for example. So Hobby Lobby, they are always running sales, constantly running sales. And so when you go into their store and you see that price tag, that original price sticker, that's the anchoring bias that's happening. You see it, and then you look at the sale, and it's so much cheaper than that other price, you feel like you're getting a good deal. And that's because that price is deviating from the original one, the one that you're anchored to, and it's much lower, so you're thinking, wow, I'm really getting something here. Of course, it's a sales tactic. If Hobby Lobby was losing money on these sales, they would not be doing it, right? Because practically everything's on sale all the time in Hobby Lobby. That shows they're making money, and you know what? That original price may be an overinflated price for what it really is worth. And you see this all the time with people on Facebook Marketplace and stuff like that. They will price their item, their product, high in anticipation that you might try to whittle them down, but you're only whittling them down to the price that they actually wanted to sell the product for. And so you got to be careful of that. Just because you see that original price tag doesn't really mean that's truly what it is priced at. They're doing that on purpose to try to anchor you to that price and associate the product to that price, so that you feel like you're getting a good deal and will be willing to pay the money for it. I think Dave Ramsey has said before that you're not really saving money when you go and buy something on sale. You're still spending money to get that thing. It's not truly a save. If you're wanting to save money, then you need to stop spending money, and that's how you actually save. By buying something on a deal, you're not really saving. I know there's other videos out there that talk about girl math and things like that, and it's kind of all lumped into the same idea that the sale is not truly what you think it is. It is using this anchoring bias strategy to get people to think that they're getting a good deal. The next one is called loss aversion, and this is going to hurt my frugal friends out there. So people who are really frugal, they may be having this loss aversion bias in the sense that when they buy something, the pain of losing the money is greater than the joy that they get from whatever product they just bought. And this can be a bad mindset to put yourself in, because then you're robbing yourself of the joy of what money is supposed to be, which is a tool to get you things that you want. And we've talked about before the good things to spend money on, and it primarily is around spending time with people that you enjoy spending time with. So your family and friends. So when you're spending money around that, that's how you get true joy. But if you're frugal and you're thinking about it from a loss aversion standpoint, then you're thinking more about the fact that you lost money to get that thing than you are thinking about what you got in the first place. So if you're a frugal person and you're thinking about everything in terms of loss, you need to challenge that mindset a little bit, because you may miss opportunities that may actually benefit you in the long run. There are things in life that we spend money on, and then they end up being of value later on, and we have to get past the sticker price, the initial price, before we can see the benefits of that long run thing. So like, for example, it is cheaper to buy coffee every day at the store, whatever restaurant you're going to, than it is to buy the upfront cost of some sort of coffee machine and all the things that are needed to go with that. But if you can look beyond that, you can see that in the long run, it's cheaper to make coffee at home and drink that than it is to keep going out every single day to buy a coffee. So if you're a person with loss aversion, you're not going to see that, right? You're not going to see what you gained. You're only focused on what you lost. And then you lose those opportunities to put yourself in a better financial position. The last one that I'm going to talk about that they mentioned in the article is mental accounting, which is the exact opposite of loss aversion. So these are the people that when they look at different piles of money, they don't put the same value on them. Yes, all of it's money, and yes, it's all actually worth the same amount, but they associate, well, this pile over here is actually valuable, more valuable than this pile over here. The best example of this is a person with a gambling problem. They will say, well, I'm just using house money right now. So essentially that money that they have, they don't value it at the same amount as the money that they walked into the gambling place with. That money is worth more to them than the money that they have won in the gambling place, because that's house money. It's worth all the same, but to them, it's money that they feel that they can just burn. So when you have this kind of mentality that this money I could just burn and then this money is more important, you overextend yourself. These are people that fly too close to the sun. They're willing to take too many risks. And then because they take too many risks, they take a lot of unnecessary losses. And going back to the gambling situation, of course, the house is more than happy for you to continue to use house money in your gambling addiction, because they know in the long run, you're going to lose that money back to them. So you're winning right now, but because you're not going to cut out right now and quit while you're ahead, you're going to keep flying too close to the sun because you're using house money. They're going to get all that money back, and they may even get the money that you walked into the property with. Because then you're going to say, oh, well, I had all this money. I got to just earn it back. I got to gain it back. And then you start taking a bunch of L's, and now you walk out with nothing. So people with this mental accounting problem, where they're associating their money differently depending on where it's coming from or depending on what it's meant to be spent on, they are taking too many unnecessary risks that are going to eventually put them in a situation of bankruptcy or needing to take on extra debts to cover the losses that they did not see coming because they were not associating money as it's all money, it's all worth the same. So the reason why I've gone through all of these is because when we have a better understanding of these different biases that are going on in our minds, we can catch ourselves in the act act of going through and using them, like the anchoring bias, for example. We can catch ourselves and say, wait a minute, is this really a sale? Or is it just they have such a high markup that it feels like a sale when it's really just regularly priced? And we can catch ourselves and stop ourselves from making silly financial mistakes. And also, going back to the beginning, we have two parts of our thinking going on. If we can catch ourselves and know that we usually go by our biases, our rule of thumbs, our automatic thinking, then we can say, wait a minute, I need to stop and think first. I need to stop and use that more rational part of my thinking before I make this purchase. You know, it was funny when I was reading that article, it talked about how economists used to think that the consumer, the regular customer, was a rational thinking person who was going to do what was best for them. And then as they studied financial habits of people, they discovered the exact opposite was true. People are irrational spenders. They do what ends up usually harming them in the long run. And it's because they're not using that rational thinking part of their brain, which requires time. It requires settling in and waiting instead of being impulsive. So if you find yourself being impulsive, I have some shorts, and I think I have another video talking about overspending tips. And I talk about that. I talk about ways to slow ourselves down so that we use the rational part of our thinking rather than the irrational part. So maybe after this video, go check out those overspending tip videos that I have, where you can set yourself up for success so you're not finding yourself constantly impulsively buying things.